Welcome, everyone, to a special edition. We don't usually podcast on Tuesdays, but we wanted to go over who killed WCW. We got an episode coming up in about an hour. So we wanted to do last week's episode. We gave everyone a good week to watch this thing. And we're going to go over this thing. And we're going to talk about who killed WCW.
Man, somebody really had to take a piss there.
I was saying the same thing.
I think it was Brett.
Or maybe Sting after this first episode.
I almost put a Bret Hart logo on his jacket.
They could be more apropos.
No, you should every week have a different person on the back. Brett, Sting, someone else.
Well, Sting was really loyal to WCW. Like, I don't know why.
Loyal to
a fault. Exactly.
It would have to be Russo, Bischoff, Hogan, and Vince at the very end. Because it's 4 episodes, right? Of course, we've already got this one out of the way, so I guess there's only 3 more left. But welcome, everybody. It's June 11th, 2024. This is kind of a special edition, as my friend Canada Dry over there said. We are going over who killed WCW. It's not quite as riveting as who shot JR, but who killed WCW is one of those philosophical questions that we're going to be asking for millennia of wrestling fanage. I am the effing expert, the maitre d' of the evening, the master of ceremonies, Mr. Isaacs. Good evening.
Now, this will be one of the greatest podcasts in the history of wrestling.
Look,
this is the greatest podcast in the history of professional wrestling.
This is the truth. Our Saturday night threesome is so nice. We had to do it twice.
Oh, yeah. We had to replicate it.
And I don't want you going over to the other podcast.
Guys.
Because you know what they're doing? They got Mick Foley winning the world title on that other podcast.
That'll put butts in seats.
That'll put butts in the chat.
And then you can challenge Vince McMahon to a match that he'll never answer.
Exactly. And didn't he do it with like a Harley in the middle of the ring?
Yeah, he had a Harley descend down to the middle of the ring from the rafters.
What a waste of money.
It's so cringy to think about now in 2024, but
late 90s, badass.
The only thing that Tony Khan wastes money is music.
Yeah.
He drops buttloads on the music.
But you know what? At least that adds to the enjoyment of the show.
It does. I mean, he could have just done like Paul Heyman used to do and just do it without permission, but I guess nowadays it's a little harder to do that.
Oh, yeah, you can.
Yeah, Paul Heyman didn't give 2 fucks.
Well, back then they didn't have like advanced algorithms that would like scan over every digital broadcast and find out, who's using what. So
real quick, before we get into this week's episode, I was flipping through like Facebook reels and Bryan Danielson was talking about how I think at Forbidden Door last year, 2023, like he was in a really bad mood before his match and he didn't know that Final Countdown was going to be played. And he's like, as soon as that song hit, those first couple notes, it just put him in an instant good mood.
Oh, yeah. How could you not be in a good mood after hearing that song?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the greatest.
It's also the fact that your boss cares enough about you and your gimmick to drop that kind of money on your intro. Like, that's pretty cool.
It is. And like I said, like EVP Joe said, music adds a lot of aesthetic to the programming. So like if you get a badass song like that, it really gets you pumped up. I mean, that song is killer.
It is.
That's like the most quintessential like 80s badass song you can possibly get.
Speaking of that, like I can't even think of too many WCW intros.
I've got a few.
NWO.
NWO, obviously. Four Horsemen is always iconic.
The Four Horsemen theme was
Ric
great.
Flair's.
Yeah.
Flair.
Which is basically the Four Horsemen.
Yeah.
DDP's ripoff of Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Yep.
Males.
It's an exact ripoff. They just changed the words.
Yeah, and plus they slightly modified the guitar riff too. Jimmy Hart made it.
Yeah.
He slightly modified the guitar riff.
It's almost as bad as Vanilla Ice's ding 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 ding.
And Bret Hart's intro in WCW sucked.
I don't even remember
compared to the other one.
Like that's
You guys
how
remember,
lackluster is. I don't even remember it in WCW.
Well, it was done by Odds, like the band Odds, but it's like nothing compared. Like, and I remember Hulk Hogan's was horrible too. Before he was American Made.
He's American Made. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what'd you think of American Males?
I loved
your buddy Buff Bagwell and Scotty Riggs.
I loved that intro.
It's
I
basically
didn't remember what it was.
It's basically just them saying American Males. American Males over and over.
It's so bad, it's good. It's like that falls under guilty pleasure.
Of course, Sting's music was badass too. Like the Crow Sting music that he came out to at Starrcade 97, which we're going to discuss here in a bit. That was pretty cool. I liked it. So I mean, there were some decent themes at WCW, and then there were some just really bad ones too.
Like no, the problem is
I wanted to share a little bit, just really quickly. Natalia Markova is now an American citizen.
Yeah, I saw that.
Before she deleted it.
Yeah, why did she delete it?
I think she didn't like the picture of herself, and then she just realized maybe I don't want to share this with everyone, and maybe it's too private.
Yeah.
I can get that. I mean, that's a deeply personal thing.
Yeah,
right?
that's what she said. It's kind of personal.
But kudos to her, man. That's awesome.
Hopefully, this leads to her getting bigger and better opportunities.
Well, they can't now. They got to call if they're going to call her like a thing. Like they can't. I think it's really good for her to kind of crush the Russian stereotype.
Yeah,
because I think that really hurts wrestlers when you get that stereotype on you.
Yeah, does she crush it or does she smash it or axe it?
Well, she's the crush. So
what I meant is like maybe now like AEW or WWE can really take a legitimate look because they don't have to worry about visa issues or anything like that. So
yeah.
Well, that's also one of the things is that like she was limited on some of the things she could do with the work visa.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And I know as she was trying to get her citizenship, she wasn't allowed to leave the country at all. Because that's why Gunther of WWE, like he hasn't gone to too many foreign PLEs because during the process you're not allowed to leave the US. Don't understand it, but you know.
It's one of those things. We're gonna have to call up the other Joe and ask him what's going on with that. And he'll say, I didn't order pizza. All right, gentlemen. Let's go ahead and get into who killed WCW. And I'm kind of just going to go over some bullet points here. And we can just kind of discuss them at will. We kind of start out with like behind the scenes footage of the final WCW Nitro. I will never forget that. It was in March of 2001. And it was in Panama City Beach, Florida. I've been on that beach. Beautiful, gorgeous beach. A bunch of drunk spring breakers were there. And it was the final WCW Nitro.
And was it not a Night of Champions?
Basically, yeah, because they had Booker T versus Scott Steiner, U.S. champ versus world champ.
Yeah.
And then
obviously they had the lightweight tag team titles on that show too.
Yeah, because they had only just introduced them a few weeks before.
Yeah.
And then obviously you had the final match ever was Sting versus Ric Flair.
Sting versus Ric Flair, which is apropos for WCW because that was the feud that kind of like started the company, really.
And we'll get into this later because this is a hot topic. Nature Boy's pissed that he's not part of this.
Yes. We'll get to that. I have some comments to say about that. But here's some of the people we do see here at this first part. We see Medusa, Booker T, Canada Dry's favorite Goldberg, The Rock,
your favorite,
The Rock, Conan, Kevin Nash, Bret Hart, and we get the famous quote from Bret Hart, "Thanks for nothing." So yeah, I think he threw.
We're past 5 minutes. You can say the other part.
What do you say? Fuck you, thanks for nothing, or something like
thanks
that.
for nothing. Go fuck yourself.
Go fuck yourself. See, the recap censors it, so I didn't see exactly what he said.
On YouTube, it didn't. It's clear as day on YouTube.
Oh yeah, that's our Brett, man. Like Hannah Dry and I were talking about this before you jumped on, Joe. That is our Brett. Like I love curmudgeon-y Brett. Like just I'm old, I'm cranky, and I don't give a shit anymore. And if I don't like you, fuck you. Like I love that.
Now that I think about it, I think he's probably always been this way, but he's held back because
he lets it go more, man.
Yeah, now he's like, what's stopping me? I'm not signed to anyone.
The funniest thing ever to me, do you remember when he made the 4 out of 10 comment about Triple H?
Didn't he hold up a sign?
Well, this is what someone asked him about Triple H or something, and he went on this tirade, and this was like a decade ago. He went on a tirade about how Triple H actually sucked and he wasn't very good, and I don't see why everybody thought he was good. He was overrated, and he's like, I'd give him a 4 out of 10. And this was at the height of like the authority angle, and people were bringing signs to Raw that said 4 out of 10.
Yeah, I think he's always kind of held a grudge on Triple H. Like he's forgiven Michaels.
Yeah, they were on Raw, and
like I think he's always held something against Triple H.
I think so too. Yeah, that's because Triple H probably knew what was going on because he was like, like that with Shawn the whole time, and they were together that evening, and he escorted him backstage to make sure Brett didn't kill him out in front of everybody, and yeah, so I can understand that.
Somebody had actually took his gear out of the dressing room on the screw job.
Mm.
And he was just too mad to even think about it. He just grabbed it and brought it back in.
Yeah.
Someone had grabbed his gear and threw it out of the dressing room.
Oh, wow. I wonder who did that.
You got wonder if is that the Hunter?
Probably.
I would put money on that Triple H.
I bet it was. Maybe that's why he's a 4 out of 10. Moving on, we've got kind of a little introduction to WCW and specifically to Eric Bischoff. We kind of go back to the 80s and the 90s and see some clips of how wrestling was back then, and they kind of explain how WCW was kind of a different universe from WWE, and was started by this upstart, this billionaire, this crazy old man named Ted Turner, who revolutionized cable television here in the States. And, we got WCW as a result of that. It was a pet project that he had that he was really passionate about. And that's how we got this company that we're talking about today. Now, gentlemen, do you have any thoughts on Ted Turner and the idea of this random billionaire starting a wrestling promotion? It's not like we haven't heard that in recent years, right?
I think it was cool that like if you like something, like he wasn't really hands on though, which is weird.
Yeah, that's probably good. It's probably good that he wasn't hands on.
WCW would not be what it was if he was hands on.
Yeah,
but
because he was just a businessman.
Yeah, like he wasn't hands on with the Braves or any of that either. But
like, I've heard stories, like, and it's from Vince's perspective, so I don't know how true it is. But he's talked to Ted Turner, and Ted Turner was like, I'm starting a wrestling business. Yeah. Just like that. And Vince's like, that's great. I do sports entertainment or something like that. Like,
yeah, that's like you slam dunk on him. Yeah.
Tell the mindset of the two guys of the 90s, how polar opposites they were.
Well, Ted Turner wanted to buy WWF. Like that was the first thing he did. Was he invited Vince McMahon to an Atlanta Braves game, sit in the owner's box with him, and he pitched the idea of buying WWF from Vince, and Vince declined. And then it was shortly thereafter that he bought the Crockett promotion and turned into WCW, and then competed with Vince, and that pissed Vince off because Vince, I guess, is a hypocrite. Ran everybody else out of business and didn't like a billionaire stepping in and challenging him the same way. So, very interesting dichotomy here. And if Ted Turner hadn't pulled the trigger on this, I don't even know where North American wrestling, the American style of wrestling, would even be today. Like, I don't know.
Well, if Ted Turner would have bought WWE,
no, if he'd never started WCW.
oh,
I don't think WWE would still exist.
I don't think so either. I think that they lit the fire.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not just that, but not even the fire, but if they're after the steroid scandal of the early 90s and everything like that, like I don't think WWF would have survived.
Let's get into that. Not the steroid scandal specifically, but how wrestling changed after the steroid scandal. We started getting the smaller guys. That's when Brett and Shawn came in, obviously, in the WWF side. And in WCW, we get a much slimmer looking Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
Like Hulk Hogan looked like he cut himself in half, like down the middle, whenever he went to WCW. He shrank that much.
And honestly, like, he looked healthier.
He did. I mean, he looked really good. He looked lean. He was still tall. He still looked strong and buff, but like he just didn't look like a super jacked bodybuilder anymore.
We also got to pay attention to the fact that in the 80s you had the first boom, and it was at its peak, and when you hit a peak, you have nowhere to go but down.
Right.
Like we'd run the Hulk Hogan thing to death in WWE.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I forget who it was, but someone in this first episode was like, I think it was Kevin Sullivan who was like, something has to change. The 80s are over. I think he was referring to Hogan. Like,
yeah. He did
mention
shtick.
It's done. It's been we literally beat that thing to a dead horse.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that this documentary mentioned here in the next part, actually, that we're going to talk about is how WCW transcended pop culture. And we had Diamond Dallas Page calling the NWO the greatest faction of all time. I agree with him on that. I think it was the greatest angle and greatest faction of all time. And then we get a little discussion about how egos and jealousy and everything kind of came into play here and kind of started to cause a little bit of friction. But, we haven't fully delved into the story of the NWO yet by this point of the program. But would you guys agree with that the NWO likely the greatest angle / faction of all time?
I think looking back, it has to be. Just because of everything it's spawned and what happened since then.
Yeah, if you don't have NWO, you don't have no DX.
Mm-mm. You don't have DX. You don't have Bullet Club. Mm-mm.
No major invasion angle.
Mm-mm.
I mean,
well, you can also argue that NWO saved WWE.
Yeah, look,
it saved wrestling.
You know what? No NWO. If there's no NWO, there's no Attitude Era. Because NWO directly regardless of what Vince says, the NWO is what is the legitimate accelerant to the Attitude Era.
I firmly believe that the NWO is the greatest angle / faction of all time. I think it's the most important angle / faction of all time. Like, I honestly, and this may be overstating, but we kind of alluded to it a few minutes ago. I don't think American wrestling quite possibly would be non-existent today if the NWO hadn't been there and kick-started American wrestling in the mid to late 90s.
Well, you know what the NWO is like?
What's that?
It's like when you're trying to start a fire and you pour a bunch of fire starter on there, then you light it, and it's like,
yep.
But then it slowly goes to like just smolder.
Yeah, if you don't have anything else to supplement it, it goes.
Yeah, so that's what the NWO was like.
Yep.
Because it got old really quickly.
And you know what the worst part is WCW had the supplements in hand. Yeah. They had enough to make to where you draw everyone with the NWO, but you keep them with your cruiserweights and your mid card because it was miles better than WWF.
The cruiserweights were fantastic.
Love
And
it.
I assume that one of these episodes is going to delve into the cruiserweight division. I would hope. This is a
I hope they
series.
deal with Eric Bischoff's fumbling of Bret Hart.
I'm sure that'll be discussed.
That has to be part. Like you could sit there, like you could say Bischoff fumbling Bret, Bischoff making Rey Mysterio unmasked, which is the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
Oh God.
So
Well, Rey Mysterio was still pretty cool unmasked. He didn't lose his mystique. He was
I understand that. But you know what happens when you take the mask off Rey? You lose merchandise sales.
True. That's why when he went back to when he went to WWE,
They're
all
like,
of a sudden the mask was back on, like it never left.
and you kind of lose the name Mysterio when you don't have.
Right.
Yeah.
Where's the mystery, Ray?
And they got rid of the junior part of his name too when he went to WWE,
Which annoyed me.
Yeah. Which is funny because like Rey Mysterio was his uncle, not his father. But yeah, he was Rey Mysterio Jr. Like it was.
I think Junior was probably another sort of angle that they did. It wasn't really Junior.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because the Rey Mysterio Sr. is his uncle. Yeah. He's in a really good horror movie called WrestleManiac. I think Liam and I talked about it on our horror movies with wrestlers episode. Very weird, very random, but check that out.
Shocker. Another Mexican wrestler in a B horror movie.
But speaking of Ray, when we see the ascension of the NWO here and the chaos they were creating and how much buzz they were generating, we see the little moment of Kevin Nash launching him like a lawn dart into the side of a trailer, which was replicated on Raw last night with Braun Breaker doing the exact same thing to Ricochet. It has been repeated many times over the years.
When I think of the NWO invasion, Rey Mysterio getting lawn darted is number one of what I always think of.
Yep.
What's even crazier is Ray wanted freaking Kevin to throw him through a window.
Yeah. Kevin Nash is like, no, you'll die.
He's like, what do you think? You think you can throw me through the window?
Oh my God.
No. Had they gimmicked it up with some like that Hollywood glass.
Yeah, sugar glass.
Yeah. Either that or they could have just left the damn window open and like threw him into the trailer. I mean, that would have been kind of cool looking too. Yeah. But yeah, we kind of go through a little spot here where, The Rock, who's the executive producer.
It's so funny. I'm looking through the comments on YouTube and they're like, why is The Rock commenting on this video?
It would have been even funnier if some AEW fan was like, and what does Daniel Garcia have to do with this?
Someone had mentioned that the reason why Flair isn't in this is because he's signed to AEW.
I don't know. I mean, that's a possibility. I didn't think about that, but that's a very real possibility because they didn't have anybody that was affiliated with AEW involved.
But this isn't a WWE run project, though.
No, so it doesn't.
It's not. But The Rock does sit on the board.
Yeah, so he's got more control now.
Yeah. But anyways, we kind of go through a gauntlet here of asking who killed WCW. Goldberg says, "That's easy. It's Vince Russo." Russo says, "That's idiotic, bro." Nash says it's the lack of organization, and an executive says that the talent killed WCW. That's kind of vague, but all right.
Well, I think he's meaning that the talent that got to run stuff.
Yeah.
You mean him?
Yeah.
Booker says it's the person with the checkbook. Ed Bischoff, sucker. So that's kind of like a little. We went through a few of the faces that we discussed earlier, and they're kind of like 1 10-second clip of who they think killed WCW, which I'm sure
Bret Hart said it was Hulk Hogan.
Oh yeah, look.
Because Bret Hart says because Hulk Hogan, because Eric Bischoff was his puppet.
The puppet master.
Yeah, he was the puppet master of. In a way, he's right, because when Eric Bischoff's booking you and you say that doesn't work for me, like
we're going to get there. We're going to talk about the Starcade thing when we get there on the show. So let's hang on to that for a few moments. We'll get there. But now we're kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of the history. That was kind of the overview of WCW up to that point. We kind of delve into Eric Bischoff's history a little bit. We find out that he was a salesman. He had this, this
when I heard
ninja game that he had with Sonny Ono.
Real quick, Joe. When I heard about Eric Bischoff's history, you know what came to mind?
What's
he
that?
is the prime example of someone who lied on his resume and still got the job.
Well, it's funny that he's a salesman because he does look like that used car salesman.
Like slimy looking.
Yes, like I can put you in a Mazda 323.
He's like, you can fit so many women in this bad boy as he slaps the
Now, guys, you got to let me put you in the extended warranty. Because we'll cover everything. We'll put some nice sheen on the outside, and we'll put some stuff on the cloth to make it like not stain as bad. Just let me.
You know what I'm gonna do just for you? I'm gonna do the undercoating absolutely free.
Oh.
The undercoating is free for you.
Oh, that's
I like your face.
He's like, that's not good enough. You know what? 10% right off the top. Look, come on.
Oh man, what a salesman! What a salesman. I could see why he was trying to sell a mop when he went to try out for WWF. Remember that? They said he did a video where he was trying to sell a mop. It would have been funny if they talked about that here. But basically, they kind of talk about Eric's history. He was a salesman. He had this product with Sonny Ono. He went to Vern Gagne, because he lived in Minnesota, where the AWA was. And Vern talked him into coming to work for him. It's like, hey, why don't you travel around the Midwest here and sell some wrestling for me? And
now, did they drop this ninja game after this? Is like, fuck the ninja game.
I don't know. I don't know. They didn't mention it again after that, so I don't know.
If the ninja game didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, the ninja game probably didn't go anywhere like he wanted it to.
He said that he was able to get Vern Gagne to plug the game on his wrestling show.
Right.
Yeah, but
but did it take off after that, or did it just kind of die?
I don't know.
I'm gonna have to Google that. I'm gonna have to do some extra research because I'm curious now. Because I hadn't heard
that those stars were too flimsy.
They look I don't know how they're sticking to something, or how you're throwing them far enough.
They need to be hard plastic with Velcro on them.
They should have showed some B-roll of like Bischoff and his wife running back and forth, throwing the little shitty stars at each other.
It's got to be him and Sonny Ono at this age doing it.
Oh, good old Sonny Ono. But yeah, we kind of get his backstory here. They kind of glossed over the fact that he worked for AWA as an announcer too. Like they didn't mention that. They just made it sound like he went straight from a salesperson to WCW as an announcer. But I'm quite certain he did some announcing for AWA too before he left. Yeah. But for some reason, they neglected to mention that.
I don't think he did announcing as much as he did like interviewing.
Yeah, like backstage interviews is what he did. He was kind of like their Mean Gene. Yeah, that's kind of what he did. But his friendship with Larry Zbyszko, of course, who was at AWA at the time, and I think he's Vern Gagne's son-in-law, if I'm not mistaken, or was at the time. But Larry Zbyszko talks him into coming down and trying out for WCW. He becomes an announcer at WCW, shakes some hands and kisses some ass and all that stuff, and somehow finagles his way into becoming the executive producer of WCW. Now, this is kind of skipping over some stuff here. Like, we completely skipped over Cowboy Bill Watts. Yeah. We completely skipped over, who was it? Bill Shaw, the guy that was the Pizza Hut executive that wanted Ric Flair to shave his head and call him Spartacus.
I thought that was still Bill Watts as well.
No, that wasn't Bill Watts. Really? No, Cowboy Bill Watts wouldn't have done that with Ric Flair.
Yeah, that was the guy after Bill Watts.
Yeah, it was that Shaw guy, the guy that was just the business executive.
The one who wouldn't give Ric Flair his down deposit back, so he just took the world title to WWF.
Yeah, and then they had to radio it out on television every week. They had to blur it out. But guys, what do you think of the little bit here about Eric Bischoff's ascension into being the executive producer? Do you think I would imagine a lot of people there had to have hated his guts for this? I'm pretty sure Jim Ross did.
How? Yeah, like Jim Ross at this point, he probably deserves that spot.
Yeah, I think this. I've heard Bischoff say before that Jim Ross was wanting that job, and Bischoff got it over him, and he kind of hated him for it.
I think Bischoff, he was handsome at that point.
Yeah, he had
he was good. They said he looked like a Ken doll, and I think he just had some charisma, and that's all it was.
Well, he also must have had a horseshoe stuck up him, because after hearing this episode, like, he shouldn't have got that job, and everything he did just worked by accident.
Yeah. We see Jamie Ingle, who was apparently an executive assistant there, saying that he was basically bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but looked very uncomfortable with what he was doing. So
because he probably was and didn't know what he was doing.
They think I sound American, eh?
American. We get some clips here of Flair, Sting, and Dusty, and then an up-and-coming Scott Hall and Kevin Nash in their various roles. I remember distinctly Scott Hall being the Diamond Stud, and Kevin Nash had like 3 different gimmicks around this time, and he had a very funny story. He said, and this is probably my favorite part of the documentary. Kevin Nash is like, so when I filmed the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and once I got back, Dusty was dropping some acid, and he told me I should be Oz. It's like, okay.
The worst part is like his decision behind saying no is like, Oz is a geographical location. It's not you mean the wizard. He's like, nah.
You couldn't dug any logic to him.
Do either of you, like, I remember watching him as Oz wrestle. Do either of you remember that?
Vaguely.
It was dumb.
I was young. So full disclosure, I was born in 85. So
okay,
like,
well, I was born in 83. So we're talking like 93 here.
Yeah. So I was like 8 years old. This is when I was just getting really.
They sprayed his hair gray.
Yeah, and he wore the big mask when he came out, and had the big goofy like wizard-looking green costume. It was absolutely stupid.
It was hideous.
I liked him better as Vinny Vegas. I thought that was better.
Vinny Vegas could have gone somewhere.
Yeah, they did the snake eyes, dropping their face in the corner. Like Vinny Vegas was cool. Oz was stupid.
Yeah.
But yeah, we kind of go over some of the crazy gimmicks of Kevin Nash here, and we see a little clip, and this has got to be one of the cheesiest, worst moments in the history of professional wrestling. It's got to be one of the worst moments in the history of professional wrestling. Yeah, I do my Skiavone there. RoboCop showing up in WCW to help Sting defeat the Dastardly Heels.
He ripped open the bar.
I remember that. I was like,
Capital Carnage. I remember watching this too when I was a kid.
The only thing that's worse than this is when they had Tugboat jump through the wall as the Shockmaster.
That was bad too. Yeah.
That was the worst. That's only worse than RoboCop.
They also showed a clip of the Halloween Havoc where Abdullah the Butcher gets shocked to death in an electric chair.
They pulled every bad moment of WCW. And if you didn't know better, if you're just like someone who's like my son, who's they must be thinking, how did WCW survive for as long as it did?
This wasn't part of the documentary. This is kind of going left field a little bit here, but do you remember when like the Dungeon of Doom pulled Hulk Hogan into like this fantasy world? Mm-hmm. And like he's in there with like this waterfall or something, and he's like, "Where am I? Yeah. There's no Hulkamaniacs here." Yeah.
A lot of stuff that Hogan did was really bad.
It was the dumbest shit ever, dude.
Brutus Beefcake was Hulk Hogan's best friend. And I don't know how you gave him such shitty gimmicks in WCW.
Oh yeah,
he was the booty man. He was the
The Zodiac.
The Zodiac, yeah.
Yeah, you can only say yes and no. It's like, yeah, I'm your best friend. I'm gonna bring you along and give you shitty gimmicks.
I don't
He
even
was
think
Zodiac. He was Booty Man. I think he actually just went by Ed Leslie once.
Yeah.
He ended up being
he
the
turned on
disciple.
Hogan. He turned on Hogan at one point, right?
I think so.
Yes, he joined the One Warrior Nation, and then that was
yeah. When he was the
Ultimate
disciple.
Warrior took off, and then he's like, "Okay, I guess I'm alone now."
So
the
here's my thing.
disciple was like his only semi-decent gimmick in WCW, and even that ended up sucking.
Well, yeah, because he's the disciple to Hulk Hogan, which sucks.
You know what was another horrible moment with the Dungeon of Doom and Hogan?
What's
when
that?
the Yeti first appeared.
Oh God.
Because the Giant would had him in a bear hug, and the Yeti just walks up behind him like this, doesn't do anything, and just convulses. Looks like he's pumping him.
Yeah, WCW had a lot of bad shit. Yeah.
And let's not forget, Hogan fought the Giant on a rooftop with a couple of monster trucks, and didn't one of them get thrown off the roof or something like that?
Yeah, I think the Giant did.
The Giant got thrown off the roof
later that
Hogan.
night for a match.
It's so insanely stupid.
Well, to be fair, WCW, WWE, didn't they throw someone off the roof in the money?
They threw Rey Mysterio. Baron Corbin threw Rey Mysterio off the roof.
Yeah, and then they no sold it the next night.
Well, there was a smaller roof underneath. Okay.
Yeah, but they didn't tell anyone that.
They're like, "Oh my God, Baron Corbin just killed Rey Mysterio." And they're like, "Okay, let's get back to the match and see who's the Money in the Bank winner."
It's like and then they no sold it.
And then what?
Because this is Owen Hart all over again.
Was it a few months later, or was it the next year that he lost his eye, but had a smaller one that grew back behind it, or something stupid?
Oh yeah. When they did the pandemic, where he feuded with Seth Rollins, and they had the.
It was the Extreme Rules match.
They had the only way you could win the match was to like remove the eyeball of the other guy.
I don't know.
And they were like, they had the people out there that were like, "It's out. And Ray was like flopping on the ground with like a bunch of fake blood. Yeah. There's been some horrible shit.
That was bad.
It's really bad.
Okay, I think we should.
That's WWE though, so let's just get back on track.
We kind of get a little synopsis of Kevin Nash and Scott Hall leaving WCW after their shitty gimmicks and going to the land of Vince and becoming big names there until Scott Hall shows up on Nitro. And he shows up and he's doing his Razor Ramon accent, which he dropped pretty quickly after WWE filed a lawsuit.
Yep.
Which they don't mention here. They might mention later. But yeah, so we see Scott Hall show up. We see Kevin Nash show up. We get a little rundown of them power bombing Eric Bischoff off the stage and claiming they've got a third person, which Bischoff reveals was going to be Sting until Hogan said he wanted it to be him.
Yeah, so. I've heard that story before. Like that's crazy. I can't imagine Sting as the third man.
Yeah.
I don't think it works.
No, we skipped over the part where Eric Bischoff's sitting in a room with Ted Turner. And he's like, "What do you need?" And they have this really cool moment where it's like, you can't, like, I really like this part of the show where they showed Eric Bischoff trying to, you can't bullshit him, blah, 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 blah. I like that because it really humanized Eric Bischoff.
Yeah. Like he said something that, Ted Turner wanted to know, Eric, what we got to do for you? What we got to give you for you to beat WWF?
No, to compete with WWF was the words.
Yeah. And he's like, you got to give me live. Got to let me go live during the week. Monday night, 2 hours. There you go.
And instantly he gave it to him.
Yep. And he literally instructed one of the other people in the room right away, give him 2 hours Monday night. So,
and not just that, but on TNT, which was cable.
Which apparently the executive who was kind of heading TNT absolutely hated it and shit a brick. because he didn't want to be involved. And that was kind of one of the themes too that was kind of discussed a few times, was that all the other Turner executives absolutely hated wrestling, hated WCW, didn't want any part of it. With one guy even saying that he wanted to make some ideas to help out, monetary wise, and he was stopped by other higher ranking executives that were like, you don't want to help him with this shit. Like, you'll be blacklisted. Everybody here will hate you. They said it would
be career suicide.
Yeah. Like, everybody here is going to hate you if you help these people. So it's like, you know, kind of foreshadowing that the executives were kind of sabotaging this thing too. But,
well, you could see what I have under my name, right?
So many to blame. I suppose we'll have to wait for the entire month of episodes to go by before we really have a synopsis of who's really to blame here. But I kind of think it's going to be a lot of different people.
I don't think you can pin what we know of the history of WCW. There's not one person who takes the majority of this.
Yeah, because you can say the executives easily. That's an easy thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
But had WCW been raking in money and being profitable,
if they were profitable in 2001, because I don't imagine they'll talk to this, but before WCW was sold to WWF, Eric Bischoff had a group of buyers who was ready to buy WCW, but as soon as AOL Time Warner pulled their slot, WCW lost all its value and everyone backed out.
Yeah, because we got to get on TV, and then what's the point?
So like I said, if they had been valuable and run well and making money, they could have still bought WCW, just went to a different television station.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of rumors on what Bischoff was wanting to do. Like, supposedly he was wanting to move WCW to set up residency in some place like Vegas and just run like a television studio. And he wanted to bring in Joey Styles to do commentary. And they said he wanted to bring in Rob Van Dam as one of the stars. Wanted to bring in some of the ECW guys. Yeah. So we'll never know.
Nope, we will not.
Because WCW went and was never seen again. Even though at the time, Linda McMahon was quoted saying that they were going to run WCW as a separate brand, but alas, that never came to fruition.
The reason for that was because the network that was doing SmackDown didn't want to have the lesser brand on their network.
There was one, they didn't want WCW, but then two, they tried to showcase WCW and they gave the main event of Raw to WCW, if you remember that, and it was Booker T and Buff Bagwell, and it was one of the worst matches you've ever seen.
It didn't go well. Yeah, the fans booed the entire. It went over
like a wet fart in church.
Oof, the fans absolutely hated that.
But I don't think that's not the match that got Buff Bagwell fired, because they already had the firing planned already.
No, but that's basically what put the nail in the coffin of WCW being its own brand.
Yeah, because it went over so horribly, and they said Vince was insanely pissed about it. Yeah, so and they brought out poor Arn Anderson and Scott Hudson, who was doing commentary for WCW right at the very end. It was very good and very underrated, by the way. I actually really liked him as a commentator. And they were doing commentary on the match, and it was just...
Was it the main event, or was it somewhere else?
It was the main event.
No, it was
that's also a problem. You don't put that in the main event.
And when JR and Lawler stepped away, they're like, well, we're handing this over to WCW, and we're not responsible for anything that goes on after this, and got up and walked off.
But to be fair, like, they couldn't do anything better. All of the big WCW names are guaranteed contracts sitting at home not working.
Yeah.
So your Stings, your Hogans, your Goldbergs, your Nashes, your Halls, anyone of any name value just stayed at home and collected a paycheck. So
you know what they should have done? They should have waited for this invasion to do it properly.
Oh, yeah.
WCW's folded. We won. And then when you get the big names later on.
What match is that? They should have waited just to let everyone sort of forget about WCW.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden WCW is invading. I thought they were dead. What?
Yeah.
And Shane's like, I told you I bought them.
They hot shotted it for sure. Yeah. Because I mean they already had a super hot angle going on with Rock and Austin for the title. And then they just had to like shoehorn all these WCW guys in immediately during that time. Because if you remember, it was that week. The last Nitro was the week of WrestleMania 17.
Yep.
So like this was all kind of shoehorned in last second.
Yeah, wasn't there?
Because then later on you could have had Shane coming back. It's like whatever happened to that Shane thing? Because we never see Shane again until that moment when the invasion comes back. It would have been perfect.
You shouldn't have had WCW guys in the skybox at Mania. They shouldn't have been seen at all.
Because it was like Hugh Morris and like Sean O'Hare. Like it wasn't like the stars of WCW, you know?
Yeah.
Like imagine you get Sting, you get Hogan, you get Goldberg, you get like all the big names.
Well, Sting was never shot coming. He's already said that he wouldn't. Back in that time, he was never going to go to WWE. Because he didn't trust Vince.
Yeah, you would have Scott Steiner. No, wasn't Scott Steiner already there? No, he was. He didn't come till much later.
He was in WCW, but he came sometime in 2002.
Yeah, WWE. Much later after the angle was
about a year later. Yeah, he was one of the guys that held out, and then like I guess took a buyout after about a year. Yeah, Goldberg held out and showed up. Flair held out and showed up. Scott Steiner held out and showed up.
Yeah. It's all the big money
after the invasion.
It's because they were all. Those are all guys that had fully guaranteed contracts.
Fully guaranteed. Yep. The only way that like they either would fully get all their money for doing absolutely nothing, or take like what was it, 70 cents on the dollar or something, and then they could go work for WWE for extra money.
And they smartly said, "Nah, we'll wait."
Like I just said, you're gonna pay me $2 million.
I don't know if I'd wait. Like if I'm really like that's the thing about some of the WCW guys. They were only there for the money.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
But like compared to like my argument and my hot take or bad take for it, AEW I think is a legit second place to go, and they're not there for the money. They're there for the wrestling.
I think too. I think that's true, but I think it's less to do with the prestige of AEW versus WCW as opposed to generational differences of the talent today of the talent back then. I think talent back then was mostly strictly centric on making money, whereas talent today cares a lot more. They care about the money, but they care a lot more about what people think of them, on social media.
Well, Brett was kind of like that too.
Brett was like that. I knew you were going to say that. I knew that was going to be your comment.
Yeah, you got me.
I know how you think, brother. I know. I've had enough of these debates with you. But Brett is somebody that does have that mentality. But like most of the other guys did not. Like most of them were just like, give me my big ass paycheck. I'll do what you tell me to, and I'm going to go home. I think it's just kind of a generational thing, honestly.
Well, it absolutely is, because Kevin Nash and Scott Hall went to WCW and started calling the WWE guy, said, "Hey, it's fully guaranteed contracts. Come on over."
Yeah.
Because that's all they cared about was the money.
And we all know Hogan only cared about money. Old, guys like Ultimate Warrior obviously just cared about money. It was just more of like a business thing back then, whereas people kind of take it a little more to heart now, which is better because it shows more passion. But, I think it's more of a generational thing than it is like a company versus company thing. That's my opinion.
Now, should we get into the Starrcade match?
Yeah, let's go ahead and jump up to that because we're kind of running short on time here. We got like 12 minutes left.
Let's take our time on talking about this. And we're a little bit over.
We'll jump to the Starrcade thing because that's kind of the culmination of this. This is kind of like what they discussed towards the very end. And we're kind of seeing some of the stuff that's going on here. And it's not looking pretty. So they bring in Hulk Hogan. They hired Hulk Hogan. They gave him 100% creative control. He has the ability to have full control over whatever he does. And he only has to work 4 pay-per-views a year. That was another thing that was in there. So we've got Starrcade 97. We've got Sting, who's got this new Crow character that Scott Hall came up with, gave him the idea for that story is discussed here. Sting's coming down the rafters with a baseball bat, beating the shit out of the NWO every week. It was very fun to watch. I always loved that part of the show.
Because up to this point, before Sting came, NWO was just running amok. No one could stop them.
They were wrecking everybody. At the end of there was a wild brawl at the end of every Nitro.
You needed somebody from WCW to step up, or this is going to be done.
My favorite thing about this, though, is Hogan's face every time Sting would drop the bat out of his sleeve.
It's so ridiculous.
Like, dude, he does it every week. You should know this by now.
It's like, he's looking at me. He's looking at me. Yeah.
Do you remember when Bret Hart gave Hulk Hogan the head? The head of Hulk Hogan? And Hulk Hogan's looking at it like,
I do remember that now that you mentioned it. Yeah.
So dumb. So dumb.
I forgot about that, but anyways, we had a year-long build here of the hot baby face Sting against the dastardly heel.
It was 18 months in the making, a year and a half.
It was long. It was a very, very
long-term storytelling.
Yeah. And it all culminated at the biggest WCW pay-per-view of all time, Starrcade 97. And of course, Hulk Hogan, it didn't work for him, brother. Had to screw it up.
Okay, so Eric Bischoff says that Sting manifested this by believing that Hogan was going to screw him over, which is such bullshit. This is the bullshittiest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Like they say throughout this whole show, Hogan would show up a half hour before TV and say, no, rewrite everything.
Yep.
So, of course, Sting is going to think, not going to believe anything till it happens.
Yeah, he's seen Hogan do this night after night after night after night. And he's just going in like, okay, pull the rug from under me. And because Sting had this look on his face, like, okay, you're going to do it. It's like someone have a gun to your face. He's looking too scared with this gun in his face.
So here's the rundown of what happened. Let me kind of explain what happened here, and then we can break it down even further.
For the two people who don't know.
Yeah, for those who don't know. For you youngins out there, I haven't heard this story 10 million times because it's been discussed ad nauseum for like 2 decades now. But so the date of the match came along. Hogan, Bischoff, and Sting had a meeting to discuss the main event and how it was going to go. It was going to be Sting going over clean and was going to win the world title. Now, Hogan didn't like the vibe that Sting was giving and didn't think that he seemed like he was into it enough, which is just absolutely stupid. I mean, this was so dumb. It did culminate in a big argument on Bischoff's 83 weeks with Conrad, which was pretty funny. You get the whole little thing about Hogan, which they didn't mention it here, but Hogan didn't like it that Sting didn't show up with a tan, that he was too pale.
Can we talk about
which is retarded because he's painted.
Well, no, not just that. Listen.
He's supposed to look dark.
His whole character is, for the last 18 months, I live in the rafters. There's no sun. He doesn't go outside. Why would he have a tan?
Yeah.
He's not Surfer Sting. He's Crow Sting.
Yeah. He's supposed to be dark. He's supposed to be spooky. He's supposed to have an edge to him. He's not
and what does this have to do with him going over because he doesn't have a tan? If you don't have a tan, brother, you're not pinning me, brother.
He doesn't look like a star. That was the whole crux of the argument. And it got into a famous...
did they say this on 83 Weeks?
Yeah.
He doesn't look like a star?
Yeah, dude, look it up. Conrad and him it's their biggest fight. Like, it's famous. You can find it on YouTube, a clip of it. And Conrad's like, what in the hell you mean you didn't put him over? You didn't put him over because he didn't have a damn tan? And they're like yelling at each other.
And Bischoff is just pulling shit out of his ass, I'm guessing.
It's hilarious. Like, dude, you need to check it out because it's absolutely hilarious. But yeah, that was a great moment in wrestling podcast history. They get into a big argument yelling at each other about Sting not going over at Starrcade. But anyways, they booked it in a way that that Nick Patrick was supposed to do a fast count. And then Bret Hart was going to come out. He was going to knock out Nick Patrick. He was going to get in the ring, usurp the role of referee, restart the match, and then Sting was going to win by Scorpion Deathlock. But Nick Patrick counted a regular count, and Hogan got a 3.
So apparently, like the story is that yes, it was supposed to be a fast 3 count, but then Hogan afterwards told Nick Patrick just do a regular 3 count because he was exerting his creative control.
So this is why it wasn't a fast 3 count. They didn't mention this in the.
No, they did not mention.
I've heard that this is a different story, but there's so many stories out there about this that like.
So it wasn't even discussed probably with Bischoff. He just went up to Nick Patrick.
No, he probably did it on his own, which you can tell happened because everything else that they say happens. You have the pin. You have Bret Hart come back out and restart the match. So obviously, there's supposed to be a fast 3 count.
Yeah,
which tells me, and anyone with half a brain, that Hogan went to Nick Patrick on the side and said count a regular 3.
It makes everyone else look dumb. Like Bret Hart looks dumb.
Well, it made the whole thing.
What do you mean
make
the
no
fast
sense.
count?
Yeah, it made the whole thing make no sense. Hogan won cleanly, but I don't like that, so I'm going to knock you out, and then I'm going to help the babyface by doing a heel thing. And
on top of that,
wasn't
this
Bret Hart was a referee against Eric Bischoff and who was it?
It was Bischoff and Zbyszko, I think.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Yeah, and he was the guest referee for that
Wasn't
match.
this also like one of Bret's first appearances?
This was his first.
This was his first
you
appearance.
can't make him look any more like a fool than what they did with this.
And why the hell didn't he wrestle? Why was he a referee?
Well, he did have the broken hand from giving the uppercut.
That's true. Yeah, that is true. He injured his hand.
But either way, like
I'm sure it would have been fine.
Even still, why would you debut Bret Hart in the middle of your biggest story?
It doesn't make sense.
Just to have him look like a chump because Hogan is an idiot.
Yeah. Hogan screwed up. He absolutely, completely fucked the biggest moment in WCW history.
Yes.
I don't think that could be understated. This was the highest bought pay-per-view in the history of WCW as a promotion, and this is how it ended. So
you know what boggles my mind is that Bischoff takes the heat for this.
Yeah.
Even though it's Hogan's fault.
Yeah.
I mean,
like if Bischoff had it run without Hogan's creative control,
I mean,
it all goes smoothly. But every time Bischoff dives in front of the bullet.
Like you can say it's Bischoff, it's Hogan's fault, creative control, but who's the one who negotiated the contract to give him creative control? Eric Bischoff.
Good old Eric B.
Well, because you're so desperate to get
I understand that.
Hulk Hogan over here to WCW.
It's a double-edged sword, right?
I understand that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's still the one who did it.
Yeah.
It's like you could argue that Hogan was the savior of WCW and the killer of WCW.
Yes.
At the same time. He saved them and then he killed them. Like,
it's almost like you're drowning. He pulls you up. I'm going to help you live.
And then sinks the lifeboat.
Doesn't work for me, brother. Gets in the boat.
There's only one life preserver, brother, and it's mine.
It's literally too much of a good thing is a bad thing. And that's what Hogan is. Was he a good thing for WCW? Absolutely. But too much of him was not a good thing.
Now, had he took this loss properly and had the NWO chase Sting for a while, it would have been way better. It
would have been a lot better.
You know what? Honestly, Hogan could have dropped the Sting, and then he could have gone away for a few months and came back as a big baby face.
Could have.
He could have.
I don't think babyface would have worked for Hogan at this point.
I think so. If they would have had him chasing the NWO because they didn't have his back, or
the NWO kick him out for losing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that was even negotiable at that point.
No. It absolutely wasn't. I'm just saying hindsight.
Lots of things you could have done.
In hindsight, it could have worked.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Yeah. I mean, it can work.
That is the biggest thing with WCW. WCW had great ideas and implemented them well. They could just never finish anything to save their life.
Yeah. Yep.
So to me, the highlight of this episode is Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff screwing Sting.
Yep. I think that's the most egregious thing that was introduced on episode 1 of this show. Yeah.
And it still boggled my mind that Eric Bischoff will still to this day jump in front of the bullet and take it for Hogan.
Sure will.
I don't get it.
I don't either.
I mean, you could honestly, you could argue Starrcade 97 was the start of the downfall of WCW. A lot of people say, oh, finger poke of doom or this or that. It's Starrcade 97 for me.
Starrcade 97 was kind of the peak. And after the main event of that is when things started to ascend downward.
In a tailspin.
Yeah.
Uncontrollably.
Which I'm sure we will get to. And
they definitely could have recovered from this.
Oh, absolutely.
They don't.
Yeah.
Nope.
No. It's an interesting case study, my friends. And I think that there's a lot of people who probably earned like doctorates in business that are wrestling fans from the Attitude Era that have written research papers about this very issue. That's an interesting case study. The downfall of this wrestling company.
You know, it's a big thing when people are doing case studies on the downfall of WCW.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now,
so,
what was did Vince? I don't know, Vince. Did Eric Bischoff become the head honcho at TNA at one point?
No, he was the executive producer of Impact, just the TV show,
just like he was for WCW.
Yeah, but he didn't have creative control, and he didn't run TNA as a whole.
So his power was pretty limited.
His power was pretty limited, yeah.
I mean, maybe, but I'm sure his power of persuasion was.
Well, the one time that he came out and improvised the finish at Victory Road of Jeff Hardy and Sting, he even said, he's like, look, I had no power in the company to do anything. I just was there, and Dixie Carter was not, and something had to be done. So I was an on-screen character, so I just went out there and improvised something and made something happen. But he said he had no power at pay-per-views or managerially in the company at all, other than strictly being the producer of Impact when it's on television.
Okay, so then, I guess you can't really blame him for any of the Impact's failings.
No, it was kind of like, I guess he was kind of similar to like a Kevin Dunn kind of role when he was there. Yeah. But it was all Dixie that, like, actually ran the company.
And then, wasn't Vince Russo hired there for something too?
Vince Russo was a writer for them. He was the head writer there for a long time. Yeah.
They were literally WCW 2.0.
Yeah. I mean, they had different stints. They had stints where Dutch Mantell, Bruce Pritchard, and Jim Cornette were all writing the show. And then they had a stint where Russo was like the primary guy writing the show, and the rest of them just kind of like were beneath him.
As much as I can't stand Jim Cornette now and his podcast and all the shit that he does, I loved him when he was an on-air figure for TNA.
I loved him when he was an on-air figure for WWE.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really, I think he did his best work in TNA. Like he was take no prisoners, no BS, put it out as it is. It was a refreshing character.
He was like the on-screen general manager for a while. Yeah.
Like he wasn't a good guy or a bad guy. He was like, this is the rule. This is what we're doing. He screwed over bad guys. He screwed over good guys.
TNA was always, always, always hard to watch in Canada. Like, there was a lot of weird times. And, like, Ring of Honor was easier to watch in Canada.
See, that's weird because it's the opposite. Because
I didn't have Ring of Honor at all until Sinclair bought them. That was the first time I even had Ring of Honor.
And even then, it was still hard to watch them because Sinclair didn't care.
Ring of Honor was always shown on Saturday nights in Canada.
Yeah. See, my local Fox affiliate was a Sinclair station. So
Yeah,
I
so
was one of
I.
the stations that got Ring of Honor. That's when I started watching it. And it was on Saturday nights at like midnight.
You would like here where I was, it had the worst slots. It was either Saturday night or Sunday at noon, and it would always go up against NFL football.
Yeah.
Like, you can't win doing this, guys.
Yeah, the time was always screwy. It was like that for the station we had here too. The time would change. It was weird.
It would always get preempted for like local college sports.
I remember. Do you remember? Like, you might remember this, Joe. Like, they would do these horrible, like, small business, like, commercials where, like, Jay Lethal would promote, like, knee braces. Do you remember that?
Yeah, he was just standing in the back.
He's like,
front of,
you gotta learn to kick out. And he, like, shows his knee brace. It's, like, very cringe. Yeah.
Sure
so this is a WCW show, guys. So
let's say something positive. All right.
Let's say something positive about something that you quirky that most people wouldn't like, but you liked about WCW. And this is who I liked in WCW.
Okay.
Screaming Norman Smiley. Like, I thought this character was awesome. I love Screaming Norman. Like, he just found like some weird way to win the hardcore title every time. It was just like,
I got one for you. A character that I loved. His nickname was the Chairman. It's La Parka.
Oh, yes.
He would always dance with the chair. Like, it was great. I loved it.
I love La Parka. And I love the moment, too, where DDP was pretending to be La Parka and hit the diamond cutter on Savage. I remember that.
Or do you remember when they had the speaker talking for La Parka and he's like, this isn't me?
Yeah.
I'm not saying this.
I'll tell you, my favorite wrestler to watch in WCW that nobody talks about today
was it Glacier?
Ultimo Dragon.
Oh, yeah.
Ultimo Dragon was phenomenal. I loved him. Loved him as a wrestler.
Dude, one of my favorite scenes from wrestling is Sonny Ono and him coming out after he wins the J Cup carrying like all 9 cruiserweight or light heavyweight titles.
He was the belt collector. He had all these belts from like AAA and New Japan. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The other wrestler that we
WWE's at one time.
Yeah.
We can't forget the innovator of offense, Chris Kanyon. This guy, he was so freaking good.
I liked him as Mortis too.
I didn't really like him as Mortis until he took that mask.
He had the cool looking mask and everything. I liked him.
Mortis and Glacier was horrible.
Until he became Kanyon, I just couldn't get it to him. When he was Kanyon, do you remember when he was going around? Like there was this little scene where he's just like giving diamond cutters to everyone.
Yeah,
he's running in the park, diamond cutting some old lady, then gives them like bang, bang.
I will say, like, I can't remember their name, but it was Chris Kanyon, DDP, and Bigelow.
Bam Bam, yeah.
They were the Jersey Triad.
Yeah,
they called themselves the Jersey Triad. They were
and they would go bada bing, bada bang, bada boom, or something like that.
They were a heel fight. It was kind of like a knockoff of like the Triple Threat from ECW.
Yeah.
Which was Candido, Bam Bam, and Shane Douglas. That's kind of what they were emulating.
But this was better.
Well, I don't know about that.
Better wrestlers.
Better wrestlers, yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing that I hated is what WCW did to Mike Awesome.
Oh, God. I loved Mike Awesome. He was so fucking good in ECW. Yeah. I loved him.
Yeah, remember he was in that. They had him into fat.
He was that 70s. He was like they gave him that 70s guy gimmick, and then they called him the Fat Chick Thriller.
It wasn't he the Canadian Killer, then the Fat Chick Thriller.
I don't even remember.
Yeah. They gave him all kinds of ridiculous.
He's not even Canadian. They give him the Canadian Killer.
One funny thing that I remember is when he was doing the 70s gimmick thing, he had like the big ass school bus, and like he was fighting in a match with ICP. And remember, he like chucked Shaggy 2 Dope onto the top of the bus, and he accidentally slid off the top of the bus.
Oh my God.
Like fell completely from the top of the bus onto the concrete floor.
Do you guys think that if Mike Awesome had chosen WWE over WCW, he would have actually been a little bit successful.
Yes,
Because he's that big guy.
Because he fit the mold of what Vince McMahon liked. Big, meaty men.
Dude, he was awesome. He was athletic. He was technical. He was a
Mike
powerhouse.
Awesome was awesome. Really?
His matches with Masato Tanaka and ECW are some of my favorite violent matches of all time.
He's also part of something that will never, ever, ever happen again. He was a WCW contracted wrestler as ECW champion who dropped the belt to Taz, a WWF contracted wrestler.
Well, if you remember, he appeared on Nitro with the ECW championship belt and like almost got in a shit ton of trouble for it. I think Heyman threatened to sue him and everything, and then that ended up with him coming back and properly dropping the belt to Taz, a WWF wrestler, on an ECW
and then Taz
show.
Dropped it to someone else.
Yeah.
I think you also look at a guy like Jericho in WCW. He was so over.
I love Jericho in WCW. Yeah.
Like he was so over. Like had he not had that WCW run, like he's not going to WWE becoming a big star.
Absolutely not.
No.
Well, in WCW, the whole cruiserweight division, Jericho, Dean Malenko, Psychosis, Ray, Eddie, Chavo, Juventud Guerrero. Like, I could go on. There's just, like, it was literally, like, the best wrestling every week.
It was. And
dumbass Eric Bischoff couldn't see that and always put it in the second half of the first hour.
And while these cruiserweights are wrestling, he's talking about the NWO the whole time.
That too. Yep.
I think the best match in WCW history from a wrestling standpoint was Eddie Guerrero versus Rey Mysterio, Halloween Havoc 97.
Yep.
Like, go back and watch that match if you all haven't seen it.
When Ray has the whole purple.
That's when Ray has the full body purple suit. Yeah.
And it's such and it wasn't it like mask versus title.
Yeah. That to me, that was the best wrestling match in WCW history.
It may have been
that one was good. There's another mired event that happens. There's the tribute match for Owen Hart, where Bret Hart wrestles Chris Benoit. Like, they couldn't have picked a worse wrestler to ruin this moment.
I know. Yeah.
Like, had it been Chris Jericho or someone else,
they had to get another Heart Dungeon guy, and that's who they picked. Yeah. Which made
like,
sense at the time.
Yeah.
Was Bulldog there at the time, or was he on his way to WCW?
I think Bulldog was gone at this point. Yeah.
Bulldog was probably gone at this point. I think he'd gone back to WWE at this point, if I'm not mistaken. Because there was a period of time
back in WCW.
He hurt his back in '98, but then I think he still went to WWE for a year or two after that, and he just wrestled in jeans. He didn't even wear like
because that's when he had that. That's when he had that program with Triple H for the title.
Yeah. And, unfortunately, he passed away shortly thereafter due to complications of that back injury.
He was on painkillers all the time. And just like...
It was the trap door that Warrior used in the War Games match that messed him up.
There's another big WCW thing that...
Yep. Absolutely. Yep. WCW memories. Wow.
Something they glossed that they glossed over, which I wish they hadn't, is the firing of Steve Austin.
Big
because
blunder.
Being told that you can't market a shaved head in black tights and black boots.
Kind of blew up on him a little bit.
Listen, I think I don't think it's the thing. Like, I don't think he was going to ever become something special in WCW.
Well, he was a fantastic wrestler, and another one of the greatest matches in WCW history was Stunning Steve Austin versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat for the WCW television title. That was an amazing match.
Like I'll use Ethan Page for an example. Like in AEW, he's kind of lost in the shuffle, but you give him a fresh start in NXT, and all of a sudden he's challenging for the title. Yeah. So it's like
that was a good match too.
It's just like puzzle pieces, right?
Yeah.
It's not always going to fit in a certain place, so you got to move it somewhere else. And I think it was like, you can't create Stone Cold Steve Austin in WCW. There's just no way.
No,
I mean, maybe not Stone Cold, but I'm sure they could have used him. He was a great wrestler, charismatic as hell.
Yeah, but he's not going to become your world champion.
no, not with Hogan.
No, like,
no,
it's not with Hogan there.
It's
like
the whole
Hogan had made sure that Bret Hart never became champion. The only reason he became champion is Hogan wasn't there.
Yeah, I think I told you privately, Canada Dry, but like I was so excited when Bret showed up in WCW.
Me too.
Because like I was a big WCW guy at the time. Obviously, Bret was my favorite wrestler growing up. I was like, yes, they got my favorite guy from WWF. And then they just saddle him with this bullshit.
Yeah, I was just remember like,
what is this, man? Like, come on.
Yeah, I remember. We'll obviously talk about this when they talk about, but I remember being so upset that Bulldog and Anvil weren't together with Bret. I was like, why don't you bring in Jericho and make it continue with the Hart family?
Neidhart was basically just a jobber most of the time there.
Yeah, he won.
Unfortunate.
He won the matches against the lower card guys.
Yeah, like he was beating up like Vincent, the late Virgil. But yeah, Neidhart was just supposed to use as an enhancement talent, which I always hated that because I always liked Neidhart.
But yeah, but Bulldog was he was flubbering actually a lot of his lines, and I think he almost called it WWE at one point. WCW.
I'll be the WWF. Like, no, it's WCW. But let's kind of wrap up here because we're in an hour and 16 minutes. I'll just say this. To me, WCW was the Southern wrestling product when I was growing up, and everybody here in my part of the country mostly favored WCW over WWF. I was kind of 50-50 growing up, but like most people I knew were WCW people. It was a Southern regional specific company, and it's something that's been missing in wrestling is a Southern centric wrestling promotion. And a lot of people left after WCW died and just never did even really watch wrestling anymore after that. And that's a real shame. It really is. So maybe someday somebody can light that fire back up. I don't know, but hopefully that didn't.
A lot of the older folks, a lot of literally just died. Like, yeah. Sorry, we're not getting those guys back.
Well, yeah, because you figure once WCW won, it's been what 20 we're at 23 years now.
Yeah.
That's literally a generation that doesn't know WCW. And if the parents aren't instilling it in them to go watch it, it's going to die.
Yeah.
So
I had relatives that when WCW died, that was it. They just quit watching wrestling. They didn't migrate to WWE. That was just
it. Wasn't what they liked. It was like WCW was wrestling where WWF is characters and entertainment.
I thought it was hokey shit. Yeah, they didn't like it.
Well, especially even with the Attitude Era, it got worse. Well, like I think when you had Shawn and Bret there, like doing a lot of the great, like they did some great matches.
New generation,
which
is between the Gold and the Attitude Era.
Yeah, the new generation doesn't get the love that it deserves.
Yeah, because look, I mean, that's what Shawn, Bret, 1, 2, 3 Kid, Razor. Like
Taker.
Yeah, Taker. There's just the wrestling was great. It's just that they were overshadowed by the scandals and everything else. They couldn't get out of the shadow of what came before them, unfortunately.
Yep.
So,
Canada Dry, do you want to wrap us up for the evening?
I want someone else to do the Just Keep Fighting speech today.
Let Joe do it. I do it every Saturday.
Okay.
Put me on the spot. Oh, I don't know. Was not expecting this, but
you can keep it short. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant.
I mean, look, Canada Dry says it every night that we're on here. Life is tough. and things are hard, but you have friends in me, Canada Dry, Mr. Isaacs, anyone in this community. I promise you, you pick up a phone, send us a text. We're going to respond. We're going to help you out. We'll do whatever we can. So, like I said, it's June. It's Pride Month. It's Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. Talk to somebody. Get the help that you need. It's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. So, if you are in that position, what I want you to do is I want you to put that fist up and remember to just keep fighting.